Okay, so now we're on to the second system. So up until now, we've learned about one system, and that was the excretory system. And the excretory system focused mainly on the kidney, the function of the nephrons in our kidney, and how we maintain a water balance in our bodies. What systems are in place to help maintain those levels of water that our body needs to best function. So our endocrine system is made of a series of mostly glands, okay, that secrete hormones into the bloodstream, and it works in conjunction with the nervous system to respond to changes in homeostasis, so changes in conditions that our body best works in. And so remember I said that even for the water balance note, if you look at what happened, if we have less water in our blood, the osmotic pressure is decreasing, and water's going to want to travel from other parts of your body into your bloodstream, and that causes a cell in your hypothalamus to shrink because it's losing water to go back into the blood. And that signals that a gland needs to release a hormone to make all of the things happen to get our water back. And so that's how the entire endocrine system works. We have a whole bunch of glands in our body all over the place that produce hormones, and then they secrete them into the bloodstream. That's the first part of it. But then we have something called target organs. And target organs is where that hormone has to travel to in order to do its job. So that's going to be the main part of this unit. So the first thing we should know is that what a hormone is. It's a chemical messenger that targets specific organs, causing biochemical changes to help keep us in homeostasis, to help us keep us in the range that our body best works at. And there's two major categories of hormones. So this is definitely something you should know. You should just be familiar with the names of the two different types and how they function, because they're different depending on what we're looking at. The first type is a protein-based hormone. So it's made of proteins and has receptors on target cells that they stimulate. The receptors themselves are also proteins. So what this means is, in one of the glands in your body, we're going to look at a whole bunch of different kinds. Your hormones can be produced in a gland, and in this case, this is a protein-based hormone, so it's made of a protein. It's going to be sent into the bloodstream, and somewhere else in your body, which we call the target organ or target cells, will have a specific receptor that will match or recognize that protein hormone, and that's how that protein hormone initiates what has to happen at that target organ. Okay, so that's how protein hormones operate. And there's page numbers here. Anytime you see a page number, it's just where in your textbook you can find information on it. The second type of hormone is called a steroid hormone, and it's based on the chemical structure of cholesterol, remember from our first unit. And instead, so with the protein hormones, we produce a protein-based hormone, and it has a receptor cell waiting for it at its target organ to help make the chemical reaction that should happen. Steroid hormones are actually, they make it to their target organ, but they can actually pass right through a cell membrane. So here's the important part for steroid hormones. They can pass through the cell membrane, and they can activate transcription. Remember that the purpose of activating transcription is to produce certain proteins. So steroid-based hormones actually have to get to their target organ and force those cells into making the proteins that are needed. Whereas a protein-based hormone is already a protein and it's got a receptor waiting for it, which is also a protein. Whereas a steroid has to get there and basically signal it that it can start transcription, which will eventually make the proteins, protein-based hormones that it needs. So that's the difference between the two main types of hormones. Now I'm going to post two blank copies of diagrams that anytime I give you a copy of a diagram that I'm asking you to label, it's something that may show up on your test or final exam. So you should know the placement of each of these types of in this case, hormones or glands. So remember, our endocrine system is made up of glands in our body that produce hormones. So here's the main glands that are in our body, and you can see that depending on whether you're male or female, some of these glands will differ. Okay, and I believe this is also in your textbook, and we're going to get into more detail of the brain later, so I'm going to leave that diagram. But yeah, so here's your main glands that we have production of hormones in occurring in our body for whenever they're needed. Okay, so here's the main one. This is the most important one, which is why they call it the master gland. It's the pituitary gland. and it's the control center for other endocrine glands. So there's glands in our body that produce hormones, but the pituitary gland actually has control over these glands. And it's composed of two different lobes. You're going to also have a diagram that I'm posting on this as well, where you're going to show which lobes are responsible for which glands and hormones. So that's kind of what you want to get out of that. So the first lobe is called the posterior lobe. It can store and release hormones, and the anterior lobe can actually produce its own. So the anterior produces it, stores it, and releases it, whereas the posterior can just store and release. And you'll see the different types that are in each one. If you're wondering where your pituitary gland is, it's part of up near your brain, tucked kind of right underneath there. And we'll look at this in a little bit more detail when we get to the central nervous system. All I want you to know now is that we consider the pituitary gland the master gland because it controls almost all of them in your body. And there's two main lobes that can be broken down into, one storing and releasing, the other one producing. Okay, so another main gland in our body, let's just cover some of this stuff up so it's not too overwhelming. Okay, our adrenal glands are the second main glands in our body. Located above the kidney, so they kind of sit on top of the kidneys, and they're made up of two glands in one shell. Okay, there's the adrenal medulla, interregulated by nerves, and it produces these two hormones. Now, what I plan to do here, and this is what I normally do in my classes because it's a lot of information coming at you. I teach the main glands and the main hormones that are produced, and we kind of just talk about it, not in a lot of detail here. And what you're eventually going to be expected to do is match all of these hormones up with where they're made and where they're intended to go. Okay, so I'm just touching on some of these lightly. So we have the adrenal medulla produces these two hormones, and when they get produced is usually in times of stress. And so you'll notice, so for instance, when you're in let's say a scary situation, you're out in the middle of the forest and you notice a big grizzly bear's chasing you down. Your body is equipped with a system that when you're stressed out in a time like this, your body will produce these two hormones, and what they do is they trigger your body to make more, increase the amount of blood sugar in your blood. Your heart rate starts to increase, your breathing increases, your metabolism in your cell increases, and your iris and blood vessels start to dilate. So remember, dilate's the opposite of constrict. And anytime you're dilating, you're increasing it. So you're increasing the amount of blood flow to your body, and your irises get enlarged as well, because basically what they're saying is your body's telling it that it's in a scary situation. In the event of, let's say, a big bear chasing you, you want all of these things to happen. You want your heart rate up, you want your breathing up, you want your awareness through your eyes up, and you want more blood going to your body because you're going to be in a position to run away from this bear. And so when you're in times of stress, these are the sorts of things that go on inside of your body, and it's these two hormones that actually cause that. Okay, and then the second one is the adrenal cortex, and it's outer regulated by hormones, and it produces three types of hormones. Now remember, you've got your medulla and the cortex, they're your adrenal glands, and they're located above your kidneys. So this is where they're located, and this is where they produce certain types of hormones. These hormones are eventually going to go somewhere else to do their job. And so in the adrenal cortex, we have three types of hormones produced: cortisol, aldosterone, and sex hormones. The cortisol releases amino acids that are converted to glucose for energy and proteins to rebuild cells. And this could be whenever. It's not necessarily in a time of stress. It's just really basically whenever needed. And aldosterone increases sodium retention and water reabsorption. So here's another one that helps to affect water balance in our body as well. And sex hormones, we don't go into much detail in this class because the assumption is that usually you're getting a lot of this in physical education classes. We don't spend a lot of time. We'll talk about what the hormones are, but we don't go into too much detail more than that in the case of anatomy and things. Okay, and here's another gland, and this is your pancreas. It contains two types of cells found in islets of Langerhans for production of digestive enzymes and hormones. And so what I really want you to know is that you don't need to know this islets of Langerhans, but what happens in our pancreas is that we get two types of cells. There's beta cells that produce insulin, so you should know what insulin does. So insulin, when blood sugar rises, allows muscles and livers to reabsorb glucose. So I'm going to put this in simple terms for you. If the amount of glucose in your blood is too high, insulin helps your liver to absorb it, so take it back out of your blood to a level that your body can function. So when somebody has diabetes, there's usually one of two problems. They don't have the ability to produce their own insulin that will help them keep their blood sugar levels within range of a good functioning level, or they don't have the ability to absorb the glucose back out of their body when necessary. And the other type of cell, alpha cells in our pancreas, produces glucagon. And glucagon does the exact opposite. So these guys are the opposite of each other. I probably should type it because I'm using a mouse right now and it's going to look terrible by the time These two hormones, both produced in the pancreas, but keep in mind you should know which one's the beta, which one's the alpha. They do the opposite job of each other. Insulin helps to remove glucose from our blood. Glucagon helps to put glucose back into our blood, and it's stored in our liver. So when we don't need glucose at the time, maybe we're not expending a lot of energy and not undergoing a lot of cellular respiration, your body has the ability to store it for later. And what happens is it's stored in the form of glycogen in our livers. And at any one time, if your blood sugar is low, let's say you haven't eaten in a long time or you've done a lot of exercise and you've used up all the glucose that was available in your body, it will then have to go to your liver, take the glycogen back out. Remember, glycogen is just a complex carbohydrate. And what will happen is it'll break it down back into glucose and put it into your blood so that your blood sugar can be raised. So these guys are the opposite of each other, at least have the opposite job. And you guys already did that, actually, I think. Yeah, you guys looked at the... So I think that's it for the intro to the endocrine system. So the endocrine system, I'm going to give you an activity where you're matching up hormones with their organs of production and their target organs as well. And here's part of it here. What you're eventually going to know, here's all the different hormones in our body, and I'm going to give you some sort of chart to organize the information, and you're going to use your textbooks to try and match these hormones up with the target organ, so where they're intended to go, but also where they're produced. Okay?